Sheriff Tome.
Good morning, Kevin Tome, Pennington County Sheriff.
George,
The,
I think we're short.
if it's okay with the chair, we have 10 or 15 minutes on our PowerPoint to run through and then talk about some of the numbers and then certainly open it up for any question and answer the commission may have. So we'll try and explain how we got to where we did and summarize some of the numbers for you all. And then again, like I say, certainly
Proceed.
answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oops. Get the right button here. I got the wrong button.
Stand. Works.
There we go. The last couple of years, this is a repeat slide from the last couple of years, and the commission's been very gracious to work with us the last few years on our National Sheriff Association did a staffing analysis for us, looking at our law enforcement division, and we identified 28 positions that we were light in our law enforcement division, which includes our transport, courthouse security types, and through that process, we've worked on it the last couple of years, and this year, if the commission sees fit, we can achieve the number we set out to achieve, and I'll walk through some of those numbers. Here's a summary of it. Initially, they said we were 42 FTEs short or positions short. We looked at their numbers, and one thing that drove that number was in a lot of parts of the country, they advocate you have a deputy or a courthouse security person in every courtroom every time court's in session. We didn't feel we were at that point in our society here in our community, and we rounded that number down to what we felt was 28 FTEs to achieve the goal outlined in the staffing analysis. In the staffing analysis, they made 35 recommendations, and we've implemented almost all those with the exception of a couple, so it was very useful data. Not all of them are related to staffing, some are related to our practices. So it was money well spent, and it's been worth our while. It helped when we moved our transport division over to the basement of the courthouse. That increased our presence and our visibility in the courthouse. So that, again, was an offset from the 42 FTEs they initially recommended. In this budget, we are requesting 4 FTEs, and we're at 24.5, and so if we get 3, we need 3.5 to get to 28, so I just rounded up to 4, and because I rounded down from 42. But so if we add the 4 FTEs, that would put us at our goal of our staffing analysis conducted by National Sheriff's Association. 2 of those are pursuant to a COPS grant. Now, we haven't had very good luck the last few years applying for the COPS grant positions, but the 2 we asked for, one is a school liaison officer to support New Underwood and Wall. I've talked to the Cooper Garnos, the superintendent out in Wall, and they and New Underwood are interested in splitting the school liaison officer, so they would each pay a quarter of the cost. We pay half the cost, roughly, and if it's approved through the COPS grant. So that's one of the positions we're talking about. And the other one is another deputy assigned to our investigations. We do joint investigations with the police department, and in particular in the area of domestic violence and then physical and sexual assault, we have 2 joint teams that we supervise. And that was one of the recommendations in the staffing study as well. And then we're trying to round out the patrol division with 2 additional deputies. So that's what encompasses the 4 FTEs. I talked about those. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this data. I used it the last couple of years. It's updated for 2015. Hope you've had a chance to look at it. But we spend a lot of time analyzing our data, looking at, and not just law enforcement, but all 4 of our divisions. But since the focus has been on law enforcement in terms of the staffing analysis, we spent more time on that in this presentation. So if you look at the deputy-initiated and public-initiated calls for service, public-initiated goes up, which has generally a corresponding impact on deputy-initiated because they're dealing with the public, less time out there doing proactive patrol, so they're handling calls to service from the public. And the other thing, and I've said this the last couple of years, is frankly, there's just more and more loons out there, and what's happening with meth, again, the resurgence of meth and just the violence that's occurring in our community, we send more than 1 deputy to a call, and that takes up, extra time. Sometimes you may have 3 deputies to a call because there's weapons involved, et cetera. So that burns a lot of resources when you have more than 1 deputy respond to a call. And again, just to break down, we look at the days of the week, Again, we use this to guide our staffing in terms of our shifts, how we structure our shifts, how we, staff our shifts. This is a temporal analysis. It just shows you, the peak times of calls, if you will. And this is just, if you look at the top, it's a public initiated calls for service.
Not to interrupt you, Kevin, but do you have where the calls of service are from? What areas?
It's a good question. I'll have to ask our analyst if they can break it down by area. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll follow up on it.
Thanks, Kev.
And then public and deputy initiated calls for service put together, and it just shows a dispersion over the, days of the week. And, Thursday is one of the busier days, Friday, and of course, you would think Saturday would be busier, but obviously based on the data, it's not. I mean, during the day, especially during tourist season, you're doing a lot of low-level calls, so it's not just the volume of calls, it's the type of call that makes a difference as well. And the public deputy initiated calls for service with the temporal analysis showing the, time of the day. Again, we use this to, figure out how to staff our shifts. Then calls for service and average response time, continues to go up. One of our sergeants pointed out something that we're going to investigate a little further that might be driving that response time up. Of course, living in the county, your response time is greater than being in the city just because of geographics. And it's a conscious decision. When we live outside the city limits, like myself, we know it's going to take fire, EMS, law enforcement longer to get there, if you have issues. So this reflects that. But, we broke it down by response time by incident code type. And, theft seems really high. And one of the sergeants brought up a good point. We're going to investigate that with dispatch because it might be how it's coded in the system when the call comes in and when they actually return the call or respond. And that might bring some of those numbers down as we look at the data and try to change our protocols to more accurately reflect when we're actually responding to the call as opposed to when we're disposing of it. Because if you put the time you make the call or arrive, that's quite a bit different than if you're there and an hour later you dispense of it and then you go 10-8 from dispatch and they log it. So we're going to look at that. Now, it wouldn't impact, the assaults or weapons calls or injury accidents, medical type calls, weapon calls. Those are, immediate responses. I want to go through each of the divisions a little bit and just talk about some of the programs. 24/7, it's been around for a number of years now. It really is it's a jail diversion program. It's also a tool for probation and parole for the judges, the courts, and the parole officers. And you can see the number of cases or people that go through the facility. The pass rate, the PBTs is over 99%. The urinalysis is a little less. You're seeing a philosophical shift from the PBTs, the portable breath tests, to the UAs, because the UAs are more encompassing. You can test for drugs and other things where the PBT just tests for alcohol. And it's 100% offender pay. That's the nice thing about that program. City County Alcohol and Drug, the number of people that are served up there is actually an amazing number in terms of meeting needs in our community. Again, you're hearing a lot about meth recently and other drugs. A lot of those programs, inpatient, outpatient, are delivered through City County Alcohol and Drug, and almost 11,000 clients were served last year. So and that's a combination, again, inpatient and outpatient. So, and these are the type of services that will be administered in the the new NAU building or former NAU building as we move over there late in 17 or whenever the renovations are done. And this is just a breakdown. If you look at that other programs provided, this is just an additional breakdown of that by male and female. This shows how it's broken down. And coroner cases, again, in 1998, the commission combined the office of sheriff and coroner, and we're out there 24/7, 365, so it made sense and still makes sense today. Number of coroner cases continue to climb. Part of that's a function of we're a regional facility, so people are life flighted to Rep City Regional Hospital and they pass away here, so we end up doing the coroner work because this is where they were deceased. Same with the ambulance, the ground transport here, and then they pass away. So that's part of that's a function of being a regional facility. But almost 23% of our cases, we do autopsies, and that's 75 of them, so that's little over one a week where we're doing autopsies. Again, it's just staff intensive. It takes, a couple investigators to attend each autopsy. So you got to document all the findings and the information and collect any evidence that might be associated with the autopsy. So. And then that's just the coroner statutes and duties, just in there for your information. The jail population, has continued to climb. It's leveled off a little bit the last couple of years. We'd like to try and continue to level it off or decrease it. We spent a lot of time talking to the commission about the MacArthur Foundation grant and some of those initiatives, and we got partially funded again with a promise of some additional funding in 2017. But we're starting some of those initiatives even without the full funding, and we hope to have an impact on the numbers at the jail. And we did this exercise at JSC, where we reduced our secure population through JDI, the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, and used more alternatives as opposed to secure incarceration. And with the net savings from secure side, we were able to fund the alternatives and still have a positive impact on the overall money spent from the county for JSC. So a similar goal with the jail. Our electronic monitoring program's been very successful. It works well. And here's the JSC Juvenile Services Center data. We spent a lot of time talking about that recently with the addition of the expansion of the Bureau of Prisons BOP program and additional staff out there. So that number of 27, you're going to see it turn and start going up on next year's slide. And if you look at the little chart off to the right, that shows you it's called ARRAY, Risk Assessment Instrument, which is something we're looking at implementing on the adult side as well. So you'd have an objective criteria on the adult side like you do on the juvenile side. And, Pennington and Minnehaha County were piloted for this, and then eventually it was created a statewide ARRAY, Risk Assessment Instrument. You can see the number of RAYs that are completed. And then the shelter care, that's our partnership with Lutheran Social Services. LSS has been a wonderful partner out there. And those are kids, in JSC before we had what we call the staff secure, non-secure side of the facility. That's basically what they run, but they have a lot more programming they can provide and access to other, nonprofit service providers. So it's a good partnership. Our warrants, we serve thousands of warrants a year, and what's that mean to our community? Well, it means, one, that a victim and their family are going to get justice because somebody's been caught and going through the system. It also means that that particular suspect isn't out there reoffending and committing more crimes and creating more victims, because that seems to be the pattern. If there's a warrant for them, they seem to continue to commit crimes until we catch up with them. And the warrant fees collected across the bottom, that's by statute. It's $25 on each warrant that's assessed to the offender. So that gives you an idea of the fees and the revenues that are collected as a result of that. If you have any questions along the way, please chime in. I'm just going, Nancy.
What, was there, I might have this wrong, but was there some kind of increase in what you can charge now for warrants, or do I have the wrong section?
Yeah, there was an increase in some of the fees out of the legislature, but warrants weren't one of them. There was an increase on some of the civil fees, the subpoenas and some of those costs is largely what increased some additional revenues for us. And I can get you the breakdown on that. I just don't recall all of them exactly off the top of my head, but warrants weren't included, but other ones were. There was some in the treasurer's office, and there was, I think, 4 or 5 in our office that it impacted.
Couldn't quite remember what it was.
Yep, the legislature passed that. Inmates, the trip east, which is our bus that goes east twice a week, every Tuesday and Wednesday, if you're looking for a ride across the state. That number has stayed fairly consistent. Again, that was put in place by former Sheriff Holloway. It offsets our transportation costs, and it gives all the other counties and the Department of Corrections a cheaper alternative and a more secure alternative to transporting people across the state. So it is one of those truly win-win things for
Kevin,
everybody. Yeah.
Or do we do them to Yankton or the different mental facilities, or just to Sioux Falls?
No, we'll put some, we transport to the Human Services Center 2 ways. Sometimes we'll do a special run just with a patrol car, 2 deputies, 1 person. Most of the time, we put them on the bus, and then we meet the Department of Corrections in Mitchell and they do the leg to Yankton and take the Human Services Center people.
Okay.
So we have an exchange that way. Yep.
Thank you.
In our in the other transports are just, back and forth to court, medical transports around town. If you look in 2014, the number really spiked. It's starting to come back down. We brought a lot of our medical back in-house. We're doing less outside transports. And I think that's a function of that it'll continue to come down, which again, you've heard a lot about Indian Health Services and lack of care, and we've been fighting that battle for about 4 years with Senator Thune's office and frustrations with Indian Health Service. And we finally just brought the mental health, and dental back in-house because it was so frustrating to take people up there. So it results in less people being transported, but it is more people we care for in the facility. And so I went to the town hall meeting. We've been talking to Senator Thune's office. I don't know what'll come out of all that in terms of incarcerated Native Americans, but they need to be considered as part of the equation, and I've been pretty vocal about it. And this is in there, and you can read through it at your leisure. Last year we talked about, transported inmates, do we have issues? And, we do have issues over at the courthouse, or if we take them outside to medical facilities. And like I stated last year, workplace violence is 15 times more likely in a judicial setting than other settings. So that's why we have courthouse security, and, we're diligent on our transports. When people in the courtroom getting sentenced, it's emotional. You get offenders and victims and their families there. So incidents do happen. Just our expenditure sheet, and again, I'm going to kind of run through these, and then we'll come back and summarize some of them. But our total budget requested is $31,553,010, and has a net change of a little over $1.4 million. But I'll explain to you how we got there. So if you look at this is a breakdown by division and by the other budget codes we use with the auditor's office. And this is the revenues that are generated by each of those divisions. One thing that's unique about the sheriff's office, we have the ability to go out and create additional revenues. And about 45% of our budget is supported by outside revenues. And that takes a lot of work by the staff to do that. And quite frankly, it's stuff they wouldn't have to do, and it could create a problem for the county in terms of revenue streams if we didn't take on the extra work. But it helps us. It provides more services, like the example of JSC. Even though Bureau of Prisons, we had the additional staff to serve their kids, all the kids in the facility get to take advantage of the additional services. So some of that holds true on the adult side. And they always say run government like a business. I feel like we are running it like a business, and we go out of our way to try and create extra revenue for the county, and also to offset some of our costs. And I'm not asking for a blank check, but I hope you'll give some deference to our request because of that, because we do go out of our way to generate the extra revenue. And the staff puts up with some hardships at the jail and JSC, because frankly, we take people that other places won't take. And we have some of the most hardcore, and I've said this again previously, the jails are the feeder system to the penitentiary. So from disorderly conduct to death row, they all start in our local jails, across the state. And so we have some very hardcore clientele, and we have some Otis of Mayberry types that are regulars that come and go and, have an intoxication problem. But
So and I'll probably ask it now, Kev, on the JSC, we are getting paid back some of that by federal money, right? Because of the 10.5 FTs, the JSC increase of 1,200,000, we're getting some of that back
correct,
through
with the
federal money.
with the cost of the 10.5 FTEs and the additional programming that goes with that, there's going to be, as I said before, an additional positive revenue for Pennington County and the compact counties, I don't know, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million probably. Yeah.
And because that's your increase is about 1,300,000, right?
On JSC you're looking at?
Yep.
Yeah. That'd be the biggest piece of it, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Without that new contract, what would that change be?
Without the new contract, I'd have to put a pencil to it. I'll follow up with you on that. But take the cost of the FTEs, so looking probably 550, 600,000. Cost of the 10.5 FTEs. So 10.5 FTEs are 547,000.
So more than half of that is, if without the contract, we'd still have a $600,000 or $700,000 increase in JSC?
What's that? Yeah, if you take into programming costs, it'd be about 650. And you're right, the rest of that would be potentially additional revenue.
Okay.
So it's-
Mr. Chair,
sorry.
could I just clarify what George was asking? Were you asking what the difference would be in his budget or in his revenues?
Since he doesn't have the expense up there yet, I would presume that there's some correlation between the revenue and what it's gonna cost us.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be, if we're making that kind of profit, that's great.
And this revenues is representative of all of our revenues, so it's not just the BOP, so that's probably a little bit deceiving too. So I'll try and break it down further and maybe that'll help answer the question.
Because I think I don't think it's just going to affect your revenues. If you didn't have that program, it would affect your budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what I was trying to
And
get
if
to.
you, sorry, Nancy.
I'm done.
And when people see that increase, they need to know why, and that there'll be federal money offsetting a lot of that and actually adding to your budget in the end, so.
And I have, the next couple of slides, I think will help answer that question. But if you look at tax support needed, which I mean, whether it's tax support or all dollars, we try and be good stewards with our money. But if you want to look at tax support needed, go over to the far right, the 16 to 17 increase, law enforcement, $950, jail went down 88,000, JSC went down 380, city, county, alcohol and drug went up 110. So a total decrease of tax support is 358,000. So to Commissioner Hadcock's question, you're right, our overall budget goes up, but again, we're 45% supported by outside revenues, and in this case, we're able to take advantage of the additional revenue. So our tax support, as prepared per the commission's guidelines, is 358,000 less. In fact, I'll summarize it here because this is my sheet where I get to brag for a minute, so you have to indulge me. But in 2013, underspent budget and overcollected revenues, and it's largely overcollected revenues. Underspent budget is usually a very small percent of it, but $1.1 million in 14, 643 in 15, a little over $1 million. And this year I said 500,000 to $1 million, but probably close to $1 million. So, in the last 4 years, we've overcollected revenues to the tune of about $3.7 million, which, for the taxpayers of Pennington County is a good thing. And, it decreases the tax burden on them. And it's not something, again, that we have to do, but it's something we do because it helps the county and does provide more services in our community. And so our tax support increase last year was 0.08%, so $13,300 for operational costs. And then our tax support request in 2017 is a negative $358,000, so.
So did you build in the 4 FTEs into your budget, or what was the total for just those 4 FTEs that you needed?
Yeah, the 4 FTEs are built into this budget, and I can send you the breakdown separately.
I appreciate that.
So they keep track of our. Would you know it? Brian says he knows it.
Okay.
The actual cost of the 4 FTEs is roughly 195,000, but because we applied for the COPS grant with that, the actual cost is 117,000 for the 4 FTEs. That's already built into the budget numbers that the sheriff's provided.
Thank you, Brian.
And on the COPS grant, for those 2 positions, it starts out with the county pays 25%, 50%, and then 75% in the 3rd year and 4th year, 100%. So that's why it's less in year 1. And then, we have, after this thing on, well, if I have to go back here.
Kevin, can I
Yep.
go back to this COPS grant?
Yep.
If you look at what was presented here, in 2017, you have 0 in the COPS grant. And so I don't know,
Can you show me where you're looking at, or?
okay, if you look under revenues,
She's looking in the auditor's
one.
book, not you.
In what the auditor put, and I just want to make you aware that there's nothing there for your COPS grant.
Okay, and we'll try to reconcile that with the auditor, and I should have pointed that out in the beginning. I know the auditor did those sheets and gave them to you. We included the same breakdown we did last year. If you go to the back of your book that you have, and, you know,
Number should be this,
what's that?
in our number, that's the number
Yeah,
that we
Yeah,
provided.
we have it in ours. If you go to these pages, this has a year-to-year breakdown. I just think these are easier to follow.
Yeah, this is so small. Okay,
Use these. One, the font's a little bigger and you can read them, and two, I just think they go across a little easier. And I understand why the auditor did it that way, but in our revenues, we do show revenue from the COPS
Okay.
grant, so we'll try and reconcile that with the auditor.
yeah, because that's kind of a lot that is taken out on what we were presented with, 150,000, and that can make, those kind of things make a difference.
Yeah.
So
By
it
the time
says, oh yeah, okay, you were right, 117.75, and then FTEs for, there's 121.75 for 2017, 121.75.
What was the question again?
On FTEs that you have at the bottom, you put 2015, 102.33, 2016, 117.75, and then 2017, Bryce, to 121.75.
Are you looking at-
Okay, never mind. I was blonde. No, that's how many you have, not your, it's funny because your numbers of the hundred, never mind. I'm like, dude, you're a little off. You're not.
But these sheets in the back that we've included, I think help you look at the difference from 16 to 17, which I assume is what you want to highlight. So we can go through those individually, or if you just assume you've looked at them, or if you want to take some time and look through them, I'd certainly answer any questions you
Yeah,
have on
because
them.
we haven't, I just got this
Oh,
morning.
okay.
So, yeah. We probably need one more, because we're trying to share this. Is there one more
I have
of
one.
these that we could,
Gave, I think we gave them to, I think we gave them to
There.
Holly.
there you go.
Thank you.
You got your own.
You need
A
it?
whole bunch of notes in there, so don't look at those.
We got an extra one.
Oh,
You got another one?
We're good.
I thought we got all these to Holly, so I apologize.
Okay, well, it's just
Yeah.
whatever. You share.
oh, so I don't have to, you have to pay me for the notes then? Okay.
So Sheriff, what you're telling, in real, to make this much simpler for some of us simple people, of all your budgets, if you take all your assumptions are correct and all your estimates are correct, you will be asking for $358,000 in taxes less than you did last year.
That's correct. And I think if you look at the last few years' worth of, over-collected revenues at the end of the year, I think we do a pretty good job of being conservative on our revenue estimates and rather under-promise and over-deliver, and that's what we try and do with our revenues.
I guess I'll ask more precisely, the revenue, would that stay the same for JSC without the grant? Without the contract, excuse me?
The 1.2 million, the additional expenses
Revenue.
on the revenue side, or revenues, I mean. Yeah, again, that's cumulative of all of our revenues, so I'd have to do a little further breakdown, but I can follow up with you and give you that breakdown. But that includes a BOP program, and then all of our other revenues are lumped into that.
The change from the last couple of years to this year is 58.9%. 1.2 million, that's pretty much all contract.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kevin?
Your detox and safe bed services went down 45%.
Well, let me go. Some of that was a function of budgets moving, and let me get to that page.
Like right at the, like 6th line down.
What we did there is, we're trying to isolate the detox and safe bed costs because we cost share that with the city. That's a 50-50 split. So we've moved a number of these items that aren't related to detox and safe beds over into the city county alcohol and drug budget, so we can isolate those costs. So when we want to bill the city, which it's 50-50 now, about 70% of the services at detox are the cities. So I think we need to continue to discuss with them about going forward, how we change that formula. And you'll notice a similar thing on the jail budget. There's one significant increase where it shows a decrease of 320,000 and a large increase of 375,000 with the line items. That was just a function of jail medical moving from one area to another, a coding request by the auditor's office. We also moved half of a mental health caseworker to JSC as part of that 10.5 FTE increase to make it 11. So. I'd also be remiss to not mention our volunteers. We have 225 to 250 volunteers that support the sheriff's office in our community, and that's an amazing number. And that's from our cadet/explorer program all the way up to our senior volunteer to reserve deputies, chaplains, people that come into the jail and do Narcotics Anonymous, NA classes, AA classes, chaplain services in all of our facilities. We just have an amazing amount of number of volunteers that support what we do, so that does help offset our costs.
We do have a lot of professional contract services increases. Those are because of, that's on a lot of your line items. If you look, regional secure detention,
Are you in JSC?
there's regional secure detention, there's, where else did I see it? If you look at a lot of your, how about treatment assessment custodian, 150%, 31% up on just programs on contract services, because we contract out with.
It might be helpful if we referred to the account number that we're referencing,
Stay up here if you got it.
which is at the top of the page.
Okay,
That'd help Kevin find
what we're talking about?
yeah.
Okay, just stay up here a second. Commissioner Hadcock, are you on the regional security detention for JSC? Is that where you're at? Because it shows a big increase, and Brian has some additional information, but a lot of that, again, is going to be driven by the BOP programming that's provided in addition to the FTE, so that's what you'll see.
There's account 101-251, that would be regional secure detention. That's up. The account 248-266, 31, 58%, 58%. Let's see, account 101-264, up 82.49%.
Are you looking at specific line items on those?
Professional contract services under personnel, this one would be treatment assessment custodial services.
Okay.
It would, I'm sorry, be 422 on there. Here,
Yeah, if you can give us that.
okay, sorry.
So.
422.
Be 422 on treatment assessments, it'll be, well, it's all 422, it looks like on
Okay.
all of them.
If you look,
Go
I
ahead,
think
identify
to
yourself.
try to break it down, Brian Mueller, Pennington County Sheriff's Office, sorry. If you, I think to make it simpler, if you look at the JSC, if you want to just, can we handle them one at a time? The JSC 101-254, I'm sorry,
That wasn't a bad, that was like 6.30.
the 251.
The regional one just before it, Brian?
Yep, the 101-251 Regional Secure
Yes,
Detention.
sir.
You're looking at the contract,
422.
specifically the contract services.
Yes, sir.
So we had to write, like the sheriff said earlier, roughly $650,000 worth of additional expenses into the budget for what is required in the statement of work from the Bureau of Prisons.
Okay.
And then with that, we also increased that revenue approximately $1.4 million on the revenue side. So the expense is gonna go up because we had to add the additional staff, the additional programming, counseling, educational services that they required in the statement of work. But that's part of the reason that we raised our costs, and then the revenues offset that cost.
So they're not are those contracts being contracted out, or we're doing the services ourselves and then we're writing those contracts? And
Under the professional contract services is anytime that we have to contract. So we have several different things under that. It would be our contract with what we pay for our records management system, what we pay for education. Educational programming is the big increase under the BOP part that's under that. But any time that we have to pay service contract fees for anything, copiers, all of that is all under that line item. But a majority of that increase is related to specific programs that we had to increase in contract with outside services, specifically for the statement of work for the BOP contract.
And how about on the treatment assessments custodial services, 101-264, the 422 again,
Okay.
82.49?
I think it would be helpful to look at we have two different budgets up at Detox, the 101-263, which would be one page before that,
Okay,
and the 101-264. And you'll see a lot of corresponding decreases. We reorganized those two budgets up there. We used to have, under the Detox budget, we used to have a lot of our counseling services, assessments and counseling services under that. And previously, when we had the Friendship House and the Adams Street facility, we had that budget completely broke up. But we reorganized it this year in anticipation for consolidating all of our services next year, next door, and tried to separate out the 263 budget being only detox and safe beds. So we took all of those additional services out and moved it into the other budget.
and you did
So-
that with JSC too, so now I understand.
Yeah, we went through the same process with JSC,
Yes.
and we went through the same process over the last 2 years where we consolidated 12 to 14 different budgets down to 4 under the law enforcement division.
So you decreased on 101-263 was detox, safe bed services with professional contracts. You're negative 54, and that's why you have increased.
Yes, so if you
And
could look
just
at
switch
those
your
two
services,
side by
okay.
side, we just reorganized those two budgets. So you'll see, we moved a lot of personnel from one budget to another too, because it was kind of a tracking nightmare as we've moved from facility to facility to facility to try to track all the personnel and expenses. Just didn't make sense in the way that we used to track it under the original Friendship House budget, because that was such a small program. So when you look at those, I think if you look at those line items and compare them to each other from those two budgets, you'll see that the costs are pretty flat.
So on the 24/7, what'd you do different? So it was a 31.58 increase on professional services under 422.
And just
Last page.
on the detox too, again, just want to remind you, that was what I said earlier about, we're trying to isolate the costs in the detox and safe beds, so we cost share that with the city, so we can identify just those costs, and that's, again, what contributed to that move and a lot of the change, but 24/7 you were on?
Yes, sir. On 422, the professional services of 31.58% increase.
Yeah, it's pretty small numbers. It went up $2,280.
I just didn't know if you were doing something different that we didn't, it's not like a big deal in one sense, but just seeing if you were doing anything different with the detox programs. That you're contracting other stuff out, or,
On the 24/7 program, we pay contract services. Instead of purchasing all of our copiers, we're started to do more of a lease program on those because we get better service and it's more cost effective. So we're just adjusting those costs and 24/7, and again, that budget is 100% supported by user pay revenues. So
Right.
that'll be a
Right.
near zero tax increase on that budget.
That's kind of a recurring fund, or like the city calls them, enterprise fund. It's a standalone fund, and like we said earlier, it's 100% offender pay, and we have a good, healthy balance in there. We're sitting at about almost $225,000 in that account in terms of a balance, which helps us when we, like last time we moved, it covered some remodel costs, covers all the staffing costs, things like that.
And we have on your sheets, all the grants and different monies that you get from different agencies.
That's
on
that's
the
correct.
sheet.
We have different line items that show both, like federal drug seizures, state drug seizures, the various grants. Those will be broken out in there.
Thank you.
Summary sheets, they're pretty specific.
Yeah, if you go to the, Brian pointed out, look at the revenue summary sheets.
Yep, I
and
just
that-
got to it.
And they're all spelled out in there, so.
That's awesome. I'm glad you guys broke that down.
Yeah.
It also shows how effective you're trying to make a difference, not by just, thinking you're gonna do a program and then, and also that the city is willing to contribute to our buildings and, our programs.
Yeah, we try and be good stewards of not just the money, but the programs we run as well. And like I say, I recognize that the other elected officials and department heads don't have as much ability to generate the additional revenues like we do. But with that comes extra work, building relationships. We have 10 to 12 North Dakota federal prisoners because our county jails are full. And that was a function of, talking to the marshal in North Dakota who I know, and they sent us some of their people because we had room. So it works out well for us to build the relationships, and we have a good reputation, in the state and regionally, so that helps foster those relationships.
So Kevin, what is private pays?
That's an individual offender pay or a client pay, individual paying it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, we'll follow up with some of the other questions that were asked that I didn't have the answer to, and we'll just email them to Holly, and she can route them to you all.
Thank you, Sheriff.
I guess the question I would have at this point is there any commissioner who has a particular change that they would be interested in looking at? And if so, provide it now so that you have some opportunity to develop a report or answer. Does anyone have any significant changes they wish to talk about?
I think looking at the budget, it'll take me a little bit to figure out if we're doing any changes, but if there's anything that I see significant, I guess I would say, but.
I just kind of like the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're fortunate that we can do that for the county, and so.
So silence means something.
I'll take it as a consensus of some sort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know all the answers right now.
Holly, I have a question. Thank you. In terms of the open meeting law and public information, do we have to wait till 10 o'clock to listen to Eric? No?
No, sir.
Are you ready, Eric?
How much are you gonna save us?
Good morning.
I saw that the sheriff's gonna save you $350,000, and I'll just say, I'll take it, and I'll just leave now, Good morning, Eric Witcher, Public Defender. Next year, I'm not gonna follow the sheriff. He's got a lot of great slides there. But I do have one quick handout that I'll hand out.
I gotta find you.
You?
In summary of my budget request is what we've been experiencing in the public defender's office is what we refer to as exponential growth over the last several years. I look back at 2013 and when I started here, and we received 5,080 cases that year. This year, we are on track to hit somewhere about 6,500 cases, so that'd be about 1,500 increase. If we continue to see the same rate of increase, we're gonna be looking at 7,000 next year or something close to that. So then it becomes such a challenge to how do we provide good services to somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 more clients each year than when I started here in 2013. And 2013 was a big year. We were down to 4,500 the year before that. So we've just continued to see this steady growth. So we've seen about a 40% increase in total files, or what we're anticipating here for 2017. And the handout that I gave you kind of gives you a sense of how we try to manage these files internally, and how many staff from the attorney side do we need to handle those files. Now, this is for this year, 2016. The last update I did was in April 15th of 16 for my projection of how many attorneys I really need in my office this year. And of that breakdown, we're anticipating about 1,474, 1,400 to 1,500 felony cases this year. Misdemeanors, about 3,180. And then those are, of course, are our core business. That's the bulk of what we do. But we also receive juvenile cases. We're on track to about the same as last year in the 160 number. Appeals, we're actually a lot higher this year on appeals. We're looking at having on average about 24 this year. A&N cases actually going down to 96. Felony PVs, those are up. Those are probation violations. That means it's a felony case. They were placed on probation. They violated the terms and conditions of their probation allegedly. Then we're appointed to represent them. And the question is, do they get to stay on probation, or will they be sent to the penitentiary by the judge? Show cause, those are the same thing on a misdemeanor end. So they were placed on misdemeanor probation, but the allegation is they violated a term and condition of their probation. And so we on track to receive about 420 of those. Mental commitments, that's substantially lower, 281, kind of surprises me. So if hopefully that is the case, the way mentals work is we have a designated attorney that does for 2 weeks. They go over to Regional West every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And they arrive there about 8, we get the files late in the afternoon, the night before. They generally will call their client. They go to Regional West at 8 o'clock in the morning, represent that person at that mental commitment hearing. Sometimes if there's several people, that can last till about noon. Oftentimes it's over in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And then there are rare circumstances where we do what are called towers hearings. There's a person that has certain physical issues where they're not able to be present at the Regional West facility. So what we do is we send an attorney into the hospital, and via ITV, we conduct the hearing right there. Meanwhile, we have another attorney that's going to be at Regional West representing anybody that's there. So that's how we conduct those. Mental commitments, once they're over, they're usually over. So we can do a lot of those in a given year. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of staff, although it is can be time consuming. And then others, there's just a random bit post-conviction cases. There are lots of other little things that we do. So just to give you a sense of what, and there's standards on how many cases an individual attorney can take of a certain type of case. For example, for felonies, we're not to exceed 150 felony files in a given year. And so if we just take a look at that line as you go across, if there's 1,474 felony files, that would mean we're supposed to have 9.8 attorneys in just that category. And as you just sort of tally up those various categories, you end up with what we should be staffed at is 23 attorneys in the office this year. And it's a little sometimes discouraging. We were a little behind when I got here, or a little, and with this exponential growth, we've always just been able to stay behind. We are perfectly staffed for about where we were in 2013 and 2014. And with 2013 numbers, it was exactly 17 attorneys is what I needed to run the office. And now, especially with the significant increase in felony files, because we used to do about 900 felonies, and now we're close to 1,500. And those are such a drain on staff. That's largely due to the methamphetamine epidemic that we're experiencing right now. You know, that was our #1 single offense that came into our office in 2015. It beat out DUI first, which is chugged along year after year, is usually the top crime that our office is appointed to represent. So it's a little, so that's posed a significant challenge for us. And I want to just talk a little bit about my budget request. The various line items are relatively similar. I am requesting 1 secretary. Right now, we have 4 people who do our secretarial work. There's 3 legal secretaries and 1 paralegal. And because of, with 7, and they're required to handle 17 attorneys, so each of them have 4 lawyers, one of them has 5. And with that ratio, we're still unable to do some of our critical secretarial work, filing, motions, letters, briefs on kind of the day of. You really kind of have to get ahead of, you know, make sure that you get your work to the secretary as well in advance. And sometimes that's just not the way a busy office like ours operates. So in the private sector, you're gonna, depending upon what kind of work they do, oftentimes you're gonna have 1, 2, or 3 legal secretaries per attorney. The state's attorney's office is about almost 1-to-1. I think they have about 15 legal secretaries. Those aren't apples to apples. I think in a public defender's office, about the best ratio is about 1-to-3. In other words, 1 legal secretary to 3 attorneys. We don't have the same document generation that like a civil law practice is going to have, et cetera. So we don't quite need that, but we are low from, I have policies that I've written that I would ask that those legal secretaries do that we still haven't been able to implement because we just can't quite get caught up there. And then a staff person is my other request. It was sort of surprising, Janet Saylor, you know, has a program that can run call volume, and she grabbed me in the hall a few months ago and said, "Do you have any idea how many calls you were getting?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. It rings off the hook. I don't know." And we had an 80%, we just looked at January of 2015 to January of 2016, and we had an 80% increase. We went from 4,357 inbound calls in 2015 for that month to 7,953 in 2016. And I honestly can't explain why. I mean, I know that part of this is methamphetamine, 24, I look at the sheriff's numbers and I see a lot of the reflection of what ends up happening in our office. And what I mean by that is there's a 92% pass rate for UAs, but that means a lot of failures when you look at the numbers of what that ends up being, because they're supposed to do 3 a week. And so we get inundated with people who are in custody. They had a UA, or they were late, or they, whatever reason that they failed that. So and so we get a lot of those calls, and you also have a lot of people that are just addicted and they're in jail. So that's another just, you know, issue that we deal with a lot. Plus just the general volume of what we're experiencing. So we put a lot of duties on our staff assistants. It's one, answering those inbound calls. They do a lot of our calendaring. They schedule appointments for the attorneys. They review, we have one staff assistant that reviews discovery, and for our first conflict check, and you know, with Dakota Plains and why you guys have that contract, if we are currently representing like a victim in another file, we can't represent the offender in this file. That's a simple conflict question. And so they're that first line, they skim through the discovery, see if there's a conflict, flag that so that we can get out of that case immediately, so it doesn't use up our time, as well as Dakota Plains can get working on it right away to give them good services. So that's a first line, and also sending that discovery out to clients. Our staff assistants send out reminder letters for court dates so that we don't have missed court dates, which then eats up our time, so we send out a lot of letters. They're doing our surveys now. We send out surveys that are anonymous for our clients, just to give us a sense of what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, where we can improve, those sort of questions. And with those, but I mean, the big part of that is that call volume and how quickly they're on the phone, you know, how they route that. And so we really need some more assistance. Oh, another staff assistant goes to jail every single day and helps people fill out their application for court-appointed counsel. And so they're in that morning court session with the attorneys and the judge and the defendants, and then takes those over to the judge for their review, and they can go ahead and appoint us if they think it's appropriate, and then opens that file. And we used to have one person that could do that whole thing every day, plus had a little bit of time left over. And now our staff assistant that does those, and you go from doing 4,500 cases annually to, you know, close to 7,000, that data entry's gotta be right. And so the name, the address, the phone number, the date of birth, the charges that they're charged with, otherwise all of our data is sort of useless coming out. So it's gotta be correct, and there's just not enough time in the day anymore for her to do all of her duties. So we've moved some of the calendaring to other staff assistants, but we've sort of hit that critical mass, so we can't quite get all of our work done. And then if anyone wants to take a holiday or get sick or anything like that, then the wheels fall off. And so we're running that sort of a thin of a ship. And I think, you know, I looked at my long-term narrative, my projections of what I was going to be asking for this year, and I'm just sort of, rather frustrating from my standpoint. I was hoping just to ask for a social worker this year to really assist us with a lot of, I mean, frankly, we just deal with people that have addiction and mental illness. I mean, that's mostly what we do, and if we could help them with those issues, hopefully they're not going to need legal services again, because that's what drives so much of what happens in our office. I mean, 95% is nonviolent or misdemeanors. I mean, it just is. The stuff that we read about in the paper, of course, we have to handle those, but it's a small portion of what's the criminal justice system anymore. Most of the stuff is nonviolent and misdemeanor. And it's about life issues and poverty and dealing with those things when they're, and if we had somebody on staff that could, you know, get them ramped up right away, connected with other services like Health and Human Services, those kind of things. So we do that as lawyers as best that we can, but when we're underwater, those sort of things become we're less able to do them, because our core responsibility is to handle their legal matter and to give them the best defense that we can. And so trying to get them to a counselor and get them into chemical dependency evaluation and into treatment and those sort of questions are, you know, those are the higher level services we want to provide that are good to do as a lawyer, but, you know, it gets tricky. So, you know, and I had a lot of hope on the MacArthur Foundation that we were going to get that funding, and we would be already well into that at this point. The big drivers for our office is the people that are sitting in jail when they fill out those applications. It just is. So a lot of people are in there on Class 2 misdemeanors. They fill out their application and they have a right to counsel if they're in jail. If we had a risk assessment instrument and they were out of jail, we wouldn't be meeting them at 10 o'clock session. They wouldn't be filling an application. They'd go to their first court date. A lot of times the state's attorney isn't going to be seeking jail time anyway. And we would never have to be appointed on that case. That would be a big driver. We're looking at misdemeanor sentence reform, which, you know, so many times, let's say somebody's got a driving under suspension, it's a Class 2 misdemeanor. They go to their sentencing and it's a $270 fine and 30 days suspended. Well, if you don't have $270 and frankly, no hope of getting that anytime soon, you're gonna miss those payments, a warrant's gonna get issued, you gotta hire a sheriff to go serve the warrant, pick them up, take them to jail, and then they sit there for 3 or 4 days till they see a judge, that just cost you more money. Now they get a lawyer a lot of times also, and at the end of the day, and I say you, it's us as a system who've spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars trying to collect 270 that they're never gonna have anyway. So the judge writes off the fine after they've ended up sitting 10 days in jail on an installment plan. And what we're looking at is trying to really do something different with that is, maybe it's just 2 days suspended jail. You can go do a work program, or if you've got money, pay the fine. If you got money, for me, I'd pay the fine. Some people might I'll take 2 days. Some people might say, I'll do 2 days of working for the sheriff, going and picking up trash, or I'll do 2 days at some sort of a community enhancement program. So we can just be a lot smarter with so many of those resources. So again, those kinds of cases, if we don't have those, the same level of suspended back-end jail time, we get appointed on so many of those order to show causes, that would help us a lot too. And if people knew what the situation is, they might say, I'm okay with going and working for 2 days. I'm not okay with the 275. They may not ask for an attorney in the first place. So I think that can make a real difference. We're, of course, at Safe Solutions, if we can get that would definitely cut down on a lot of people as well. I'm also on another work group with Presiding Judge Craig Fifley, and we're really we're doing a very deep dive on this whole application process. How can we, one, simplify the form? It's a very complicated financial instrument. Most people fill it out while they're in custody when they have no access to any financial information. And it's kind of a harried environment when they're trying to do so. And it's a much simpler form, and also provide good information to judges, like what's the marketplace for a DUI second or a first or a possession of controlled substance, so they can match apples to apples, saying this person has $800 in discretionary income to hire an attorney, and this offense, in the marketplace, it only costs $500 to hire an attorney, so therefore I'm going to deny that application. There's that, and we're looking at some ways to sort of kind of be creative about how do we gap fund, because I think one of the great criticisms of governmental programs is either you're in or you're out. So you get Section 8 housing or you don't. And so there's no in between. And so much of this is sort of that working poor that they don't have enough to hire a private attorney, but they've got some and they could supplement. And so they don't just need a public defender either. And so we're looking at some ways that we might be able to be creative with that, where the judge could order, for an example, of course, the devil's always in the details of these, and we're going to have to work through a lot of problems, but let's say they have $500 for a $1,000 retainer case. That's what it would generally cost. Well, instead of getting a public defender, we'll sort of say, here, you go hire a private lawyer of your own choosing for $500, give them the $500, but we can guarantee the back end if it gets to $1,000. So a lot of times a retainer is just in case things get complicated, so they're covered. So that case might only cost $500. So instead of going to my office or another public defender's office or a court-appointed attorney, it goes to a private attorney. And it might cost, 5 hours worth of work on the back end. That's possible. Yes. Do you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
So if you make contact with this person in jail, and then they go to the court system and the judge looks at their ability to pay, is there any way that you could continue to be the lawyer and they would pay the county their difference? That might be much easier than your bridge funding, trying to keep track of that.
That's another option that's available. And there's kind of, eventually, hopefully, we're going to have 3 buckets. You're either eligible for court-appointed counsel, not eligible, or eligible with the ability to pay. In other words, you can supplement some of this. And so the judge can, one, say, we're going to have you, appoint you counsel, but you gotta pay $100 a month or whatever towards your, or maybe it's $400 up front. You apply that to the clerk of court's office. Those options, if we can simplify this process a little bit better, hopefully we'll be able to get that option, and then we're gonna look at that other option too, and just see, because it may get so complicated that it's not worth trying, but we're looking at that. We are very efficient. We're $350 to $360 on average per case at the public defender's office. And, unfortunately, looking at where we're going here, I mean, we're right now, I just did an audit, and we're underwater again. We can usually do okay during the winter with the way we've been staffed, and then as the summer comes and we get 135 cases a week, I mean, they come rolling in, and that's when we just get underwater. I had one attorney with 140 files. I've got open files, and that's mostly felonies. So that gets into that. And I got several over 100, and so we're gonna have to look at how we're gonna get out of this now. And that means we have to get out of cases. And we know what that costs. It's $1,000 on average every time we get out of a case. And so we've been trying to get out of a few to just keep ourselves okay, but these numbers just keep going like that. And so we're always a year or two behind in trying to keep up.
Eric, you're looking for us 2 FTEs, is that what you're saying?
4, hopefully that translated correctly. 2
secretary.
attorneys and a legal secretary and a staff assistant.
I take it that your first page here is what you've got. The second page is the 4 that you want extra.
Yeah, I think that's the way Julie had kind of reconfigured this, so.
Because I was wondering where you come up with 278,000 salary, and that's just for 2 people, but that's 4 people.
That's 4 people, yep.
Where are you getting on the second? I'm seeing 3.6.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I have another question for Eric.
Oh, okay. But the
When you were
total
talking about the risk assessment, I'm a little confused, because I know that State's Attorney's Office is planning on starting this. So yours would be a separate program, or how does that?
No, it's that program. So what a risk assessment instrument is when somebody gets arrested by the sheriff or the police department, they come in and they're scored, and we do this in the juvenile services. And if it scores this number that's less than, let's say it's 5, I don't know what that risk assessment will mean, but if it's 5, then they're automatically released. So they don't see a judge at the 10 o'clock session the next day or over the week or on Monday if they get arrested on a Friday night. And so they're out of the jail, so the jail's number should go down, and our number should go down as well, because we get so much business out of that 10 o'clock session.
He started it through the Juvenile Justice
Yeah,
Reform Act, but
I
Yeah,
just
so
noticed.
it'll be that same program. We don't need
Okay.
anything more from that, and
so when they're arrested, that's when they do the Ray assessment on them, not you guys,
nope.
Okay.
It should be done right in the jail.
which
And
that's what they do.
who's gonna staff that, I think is something that we ultimately have to determine, but it will likely be somebody in the sheriff's department or court services, or, we'll have to figure that out. But that position at the state's attorney's office is sort of an expediter, somebody that's gonna get this thing going, get
be
it.
the organizer.
Organizer,
Yeah.
work it all up, and then.
But when they're gonna start that, Eric?
I
if
don't
we find-
know. I know Mark has,
Mark?
yeah, is he here? Oh, there he is.
We've advertised it, the advertisement closed Monday, and we're planning on doing interviews, so we hope to have that person on board, certainly by the 1st of August,
Awesome.
hopefully before.
And then that's when you'll start doing the Ray program, and,
That's what that has to be the process of
sorry, Mark.
neutralisis of record.
So tell us how that works. They're arrested, and then when they come into the jail, or how does it work?
Eric had it pretty much right. When they come in, it's meant to be a more objective version of assessing the risk to the community and the risk of flight. And so you look at various things, and they basically get scored. If you failed to show up for court last time, you get 3 points. If this is a felony, you get 5 points. If it's a violent felony, you get 12 points. And we look at the final score.
But is anybody that got arrested, or who goes through the Ray program? How about
Everybody who
that?
gets arrested.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Everybody who gets arrested goes through the Ray program. What we're doing and what we're starting in my office that hopefully will lead to this is hiring somebody who will help create the Ray program. There are essentially 3 validated programs nationwide, but none of them will let you just like buy it off the shelf. You have to work with them because they don't want their instrument to be denigrated if you administer it improperly. So anytime you use one of these, you have to follow a certain protocol. And the person we're hiring would help us choose between them, make sure that we're in line with the protocol, and decide how we want to do it. And then implementing would be what Eric has been talking about.
And it's been very, very, very successful through the juvenile justice on cutting down a lot of the issues and actually analyzing the needs of the people coming in instead of not assessing people and just putting where we think they should be. And that's why they do those rate programs. So it's pretty exciting to see the numbers and the differences that that program has made in the juvenile system. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
And then, I would, one thing that's nice about having, national standards and standards available for staffing for attorneys is we can look at these things over time. They don't change. And so, as these numbers come down, we should be able to, stay where we are or staff down. And that's my hope. We stop seeing this growth. And it's a lot easier to, wrangle 17 lawyers and 19 lawyers and be easier to do 15. It really would be, so.
Eric.
Okay.
Any questions?
Do you expect a capital case this year, or do you always get one?
No, well, yes and no. We don't always get one. We haven't had one for a long, long time. But on my separate budget about service and fees, if we have a capital case, and we should probably know soon, we will need to have, it's a substantial difference in what we need for witnesses and services budget for a public defender's office, or any law firm that's gonna be required to handle a case. So that's where that comes in. If we do not, if Mr. Vargo does not seek the death penalty, that won't be necessary.
We will be talking to him shortly.
Yeah, so, there's again, there's standards on how you defend a death penalty case. And if you don't get that right on the front end, it'll cost you in the back end, it really will. I would probably recommend you maybe visit with some of the Lawrence County commissioners about their experience with doing it not correctly necessarily on the front end and what that's cost them. In 2 of those defenses, last I know, it's well over $1 million those costs, taxpayer costs have been per defendant. And the one case where the person did receive life, and that was represented by the public defender's office as well as our private attorney, that was only a few $100,000. So if you can get those, there's gonna be appeals no matter what if there's a conviction, but if you gotta go back and redo the entire trial or go back and redo that entire penalty phase, it's that meter just really goes. So, and they're expensive though. And there's requirements, so we're gonna have to get a mitigation specialist as well as a number of other experts involved in the matter early, and they're not inexpensive at all. Very, very expensive.
Do you believe you're gonna need any supplements this year?
I will if, again, if Mr. Vargo chooses to seek the death penalty in those cases, then, or with our client, we will be requiring a supplement. And we're gonna have to get onto that. We're actually, our standards are, if we think that there's a high likelihood that the death penalty will be seeked, we gotta start now. So we are trying to gather up what that's gonna cost us in the balance of 2016 And so as soon as I have those, I'll probably be in front of you requesting that supplement, so.
Do you have a guesstimate?
This year, hopefully it's only gonna be 50 or 60,000 for the balance of this year by the time we get somebody in. If, but it could be high, I don't know, I mean,
But that's a guesstimate.
I would say between 50 and 100. That'd be a very safe estimate from my standpoint,
Do you
but
plan on, if you got one, do you hire outside counsel to assist?
we wouldn't hire one, but one would be appointed as well. Again, the standards is you can't have, well, you should have two firms working on it, or another attorney, whether it's a sole practitioner, as well as in-house. So that's gonna be the standard for each of these defendants, is they're gonna have two, essentially law firms appointed to represent each individual.
Does that go through the appeal then too? The appeals, I should say.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure if you need to have two attorneys on an appeal. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think you can just have one, but I haven't looked at that, but. Okay.
Any direction for Eric at this point from the commission?
Before that, I have a question. On your handout sheet here, you got Class 2 misdemeanors, I presume that's 2016 and 2015.
I have numbers for 2015, and those are hard numbers, meaning those, we know exactly how many we got. And then there's the 2016 numbers, which are our projection.
Do you have any kind of breakout as to how many of these come from a state's attorney versus a city attorney?
I don't, but I don't know that I have that on this form, but I have a pretty good, I can get you the 2015 number, and we can probably project that way.
Please.
Just give me a moment here. In 2015, we received 117 city tickets only, so
That was all Class 2 misdemeanor.
those would all be Class 2 misdemeanors, yeah.
Thank you, and I guess for the other four commissioners, I sat through a dog trial that the city brought on the gal that supposedly was, I forget the exact charge, but basically harming the dog by not feeding it and whatever, and your public defender did a good job, and got the person off, but you kind of wonder about bringing charges like that, and 117, so about 10% or from the city attorney, and the 90% are from Pennington County.
Yeah, about 90% will be state charges or non-city ordinance tickets. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Next up is weed and pest. Morning, Scott.
Morning. Scott Guffey, Pennington County Natural Resources Director. I got 4 budgets to present this morning. Any particular order you want to start in?
You're in charge.
Okay, well, let's start with the big one, 615, the weed and pest budget. If you see there, I did do roughly a $60,000 increase. This year, the auditor requested that with our revenues, it's up and down, and it's largely dependent on our Forest Service agreements. And they don't know how much that's gonna be till October when their fiscal year starts. So going into next year, I don't know what it's gonna be. So I estimated high, and then if we don't spend it, I won't hire the additional seasonals or the chemical and stuff like that. So there'll be a cost savings on what we spend. So it's a little different this year. So the 60,000 is, 30,000 of it is for a vehicle replacement. So operational wise, it's only a $30,000 increase. And if you look at my revenues, I projected a $40,500 increase in revenues. So that more than offsets my operation costs. The vehicle request is for a vehicle replacement on one of our pickups. It's a 2008 3/4 ton pickup. by the end of this year, it'll have over 110,000 miles on it, so it's getting up there. It's all part of a replacement plan. We got some other vehicles that are starting to get miles on it too, so this is kind of the start of the process to replace those vehicles, so we're not stuck with a bunch of vehicles that are gonna be nickel and diming us over time here. So that's kind of it. I will be, this year we do have increased in our Forest Service contract, so I'll be coming in shortly to ask for a supplement back to this year's budget. We're gonna be over $40,000 in over collected revenue this year, so that'll offset that cost. So I'll be asking for a supplement roughly of $38,000. I did go with an additional seasonal this year just to handle our workload. So that's nice with the seasonal labor. They're easy to bring in and out every year, so it's not like you're letting go in a full-time employee, so. I guess any questions specific to 615, the weed and pest? Moving on to 616, that was previously the mountain pine beetle budget. Before that, it was the West Nile virus budget. It's kind of the catch-all 616. We tried to come up with a good name for it, and we just came up with natural resource management budget. So it's replacing or just renaming the mountain pine beetle budget now as we move into our shaded field break work that we're doing with this budget. I did bump that by 5,000 on the service and fees. Just to round that up to $70,000 that we have available for our contractual agreements, because that's what a lot of it's going to be once we do these layouts. I just got done with the RFP for the Idlewise Mountain project. I sent it over to Jay for his review. We're hoping to fly that here next month and have a contractor in place by first part of August. Once those bids come in, that'll give us a better idea of how much per acre this is gonna cost through that shaded field break. Roughly, it'll probably be between that $300 to $600 an acre. I did put in for a resource advisory Title II project for $40,000 for our shaded field break, so I'll know June 30th they'll award those projects, so I'm pretty hopeful that we'll get that, but we'll find out. So I did not put that in the revenue. So that would be unanticipated revenue. But hopefully we'll get that and we'll be able to spend that next year. Any questions specific to 616?
And you needed 60 from 615 and 5,000 for 616.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And they're all, well, the 5,000 in 616 isn't revenue supported. The 615 is all revenue supported except for a portion of the vehicle replacement. So 216, 616, that's the old Title III dollars. The state's attorney, or not the state's attorney, the state auditor would like us to zero that fund out. And we meant to zero it out a few years ago when we were doing all our pine beetle work. It just, somehow some money got left over in there. There's $14,613 left over. We can use it on our shaded field break work. So we'll zero that out next year. And then the predatory control budget, the 101-166, that's required by statute. That's what we get from, we get basically an invoice from Game Fish and Parks, and that's our 1 to 2 match for the state trapper that takes care of the predatory issues for livestock and ranchers. So it hasn't changed. That's based on the annual USDA, not the annual, but the every 5-year USDA census for livestock numbers. So that one's set for a couple more years. Not a lot of money, and we get a lot of service out of that. So pretty short and simple. The big change is instead of coming in doing every year, doing a supplement when we get those big contracts, we're estimating big. If we don't get it, then we don't spend it on our side of the budget, so.
The total amount you're asking for is 65?
On on the weed and pest budget, the total I'm asking for is 59,239.
Okay,
And 30,000 of that's vehicle replacement, and that's offset by the $40,500 increase in revenues.
and then 5,000 from 616.
616, yep.
Any other questions for Scott? Any particular direction that you would seek from him?
Kill those weeds.
What's that?
I said, kill
Maybe
those
just-
weeds.
Maybe just a question, Scott, we really can zero that out. We've tried that Title III money to zero it out for several years, and
Yeah, it'll be zeroed out. The bad thing is the new Title III. It would be nice to get those
yeah.
loosened up because that's a use it or lose it. And right now, the only thing we can use it on is search and rescue. And normally there is search and rescue costs out there, so. Once Denny retires, I think I'm gonna take over handling. Denny kinda asked if I would take that over and handle all the postings and all the stuff that goes with that, so.
Sure.
I'll work on seeing if we can't, I know there's been other states trying to loosen up those restrictions on it, so we have better use of
Yeah.
those dollars, so.
You know, and the congressional delegation has tried to change that. So
I
that we
know
could
when-
actually use the money.
Right, and I know a couple years ago when we had those folks from NACO out here, I
Yeah.
visited with one of them, it sounds like they got somebody that's kinda on top of that stuff, so maybe I'll try to find out who that is and visit with them some more to see what the holdup is.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense because as that guy from the Forest Service said, once you turn that money back, it goes to the black hole
Yeah.
and nobody knows where that money went.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly,
so you should use it locally.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you,
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Scott.
thank you.
Okay, next steps, planning and zoning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this should be pretty quick. Last year, we looked at, we requested $58,000 for our budget, not including staffing. This year, we're looking at $61,400 with a small increase. The biggest increase that we're looking for would be actually put into long-term reserves, which was a recommended move by the auditors, and we're requesting $60,000 for that, for the comprehensive plan to be added to the $44,000 that we already have put away. So every year, we're looking to put a little bit of the extra money away for a comprehensive plan. So if that would be approved, that would bring us just over $100,000 for a comp plan, which will probably cost us around $200,000 right now. The longer we put it off, the higher the cost is gonna be.
And if we never do it?
Then we're in a world of hurt.
You
But,
know I love that comprehensive plan, BJ Conover.
But, yes, overall, most of our increases are actually due to publications with the newspapers, because their prices are gonna go up, so we're asking for more money. Also, the number of copies that we're printing bigger packets now. We're actually getting a lot more requests for records and information, so we're printing off extra copies, sometimes hundreds of pages for citizens who want information about neighbors or about ongoing events. So those costs are going up. One thing that's not going up, though, are our fees, our permit fees. For building permits, our office still only sees $60 of every building permit that comes up. The rest go into the drainage funds. But for other permits, such as planned unit development, CUPs, we get all that money. But of that, we still only collect a certain amount for publication. So that fee hasn't changed, but the publication cost is going up.
Have you ever, well, and to me, you should build those costs into your fees, because that makes sense in anything you do. So I think maybe you should take a look at that, or you know, have a committee, or however you do that.
Yeah, we would
And then
like to.
how are they comparable to the city?
I haven't compared them to the city, I do not know.
And I think that would be good to do comparables
Good idea.
to other counties or municipalities, probably counties, I would say, on your fees. And then, again, the publications and the things that we have to pay for should be I think, increased in your fees.
Agreed, yeah, we'd like it to make it zero.
So,
Yeah.
just to kind of follow what Deb's saying, I know it could be more difficult, rather than just saying we're gonna charge you $50 for publication. But how, can you kind of get an idea for sure? I mean, if you're publishing in this many papers, this type of thing, it's kind of the same each time, so maybe if it's really costing $70, you could try to make it match what you're actually spending, or is that illegal to have a different amount for everything?
I don't know if it's illegal. We kind of just take the average. Some publications are shorter, so they cost less. Some are extensive, so they cost more, and it kind of evens out across.
Yeah. But in a way, that's not fair to the people who have the shorter one, and the ones who have the longer one should pay for it.
Then we can look into that.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay.
Nice budget.
I'm not asking for.
In terms of the comprehensive plan, we've been giving lip service to it for quite a while.
Few years.
And I think ultimately the commission needs to take a position on the matter and provide you with some direction. The question has been talked about doing it in-house and also contracting it out. The relationship between the city's new comprehensive plan and the county's comprehensive plan, and the relationship of that being, the cities being current and potentially representing at least some portion of the county's plan. Do you have a recommendation as to what you and your department feels would be the best approach?
Our feeling is, and we believe that out of house would be best. You're going to get new perspective. You're going to get more current approaches and more current, professional look at it. These people do it for a living. They create these for a living. We don't. We follow them for a living. And to have those perspectives from an outside agency, I feel and staff feels would be best. They're also more adept at being able to have all the public meetings and set all up. That would all be out of staff's hands. We wouldn't have to take extra time to do that, which we don't have a lot of the time now to set up all that, especially multiple public hearings to be able to get the input that's required all over the county. And to touch on one thing you had mentioned, where yes, the city has just done theirs, pretty much Pennington County wide with all the incorporated cities. Everybody's done it in the last few years. The county as a whole hasn't.
And Mr. Chair, I have a question following what you just said. And the concern I have is that if we're 100,000 this year, if we approve this in our little savings account, and if it takes us another 2 or 3 years to get to the 200,000, our relevancy to all of the other cities that have done a comprehensive plan really becomes questionable, where if we would do it now, bringing in an outside company to do that, they would have more up-to-date information in the current comprehensive plans that the cities in our county have. But if we wait 3 years, by the time we get the money saved, then those are not as relevant, and then I'm not sure we get as good a product.
Right, and I agree. There's two companies right now, two big ones. The one that did the one for Rapid City, Clarion, and the one that had done the joint land use study for Ellsworth. Both of those companies know this area inside and out, and I'd say more so even Matrix, which is the company that did the joint land use study.
Good.
If the 60,000 was approved for the long term, my approach would be to find a company that everybody approves of that would take payments, phase payments, instead of one bulk sum. So we could get it started, but then that would mean the county would be committed to whatever the total cost would be over the course of the year. But at least we'd get something started.
I really would like to see us commit to actually getting this done, because we hear this over and over and over again. It's used for different kinds of arguments, and also we have a planning and zoning commission that feels that they are not as well directed because they don't have a current plan.
Right, everything's based off of that direction, which is the outlook from the commissioners over the next 5 or 7 to 10 years. Also, just so to be clear, when I talk about the comprehensive plan, it's not just that one document. It's a request for the comprehensive plan, the entire zoning ordinance, the subregs, the flood ordinance, all of those would get looked at in one book. So it's not just the one document.
I recognize that I am not going to be continuing on, but I would really urge the other commissioners to think about the fact that maybe we need to make that commitment now to go ahead and do that. And if you could find a company that's reputable, that will do a good job, and would take the money, take the installments, to me, that's really important, because we're going to continue. We all are frustrated when we do planning and zoning information ourselves up here on the dais in our own commission meetings. Planning and zoning is frustrated. The public is frustrated. The staff is frustrated.
So on the comp plan, they don't just do future land use areas. They're going to do ordinances, and you're going to look at how our,
Right.
they're going to redo our ordinances and different stuff.
They're going to look at it, make sure everything matches. And when Clarion was first approached by it from Director Jennison years ago, that was all in one package deal for $170,000.
I'd like to look at that again, PJ, because if it was just about future land use, I wasn't in agreement again, because you know how I feel, how that kind of works. But if it's about our ordinances and different things, because a lot of constituents been talking to me, you know, because I've been working with you and Chitima and a group of people on our ordinances, that we could use some changes in there that are more updated, and wording that was more updated, because we haven't done it for a long time. So I'm in agreement that way.
Yeah, you can't really change one without the other.
And I can tell you from experience, it's a lot of work.
And we're only changing one, two.
So thank you for all you guys do.
It's a state law, we need it, we need to do it. I have less confidence in it, because all I see is, we're gonna rezone this piece of property, and at the same time, we're gonna change the comp plan. And we do it all the time. And we're gonna continue to do that, and so I think it's a waste of $200,000, but I think we need to do it. Or we need this board to say, no, we're not gonna rezone this, because that's not what it says in the comp plan. And that'll never happen, so.
But that's why I said, if they're gonna look at the ordinances and stuff too, I'm good with that, because the need for people coming in that ask me stuff for help on that as well, and then I have to come in with you. The interpretation, like we said, is different in the way that it could be a lot clearer. How about that?
Yeah.
But I agree, I think you should frankly start looking around. I suppose there's somebody out there that'll take payments, I mean.
There are.
We got a good credit rating.
Yeah, we've been looking around, I've been asking around continuously for the last 3 years, and when Cassie and I were at the APA conference in Phoenix, we made it a point to go around to the different companies and get business cards and ask them what they were doing. Matrix happened to be there, Clarion was there, so we talked with them, and they're the closest
PJ, you can
geographically to us.
putting that in your budget, what would your total be then if we decided to do the comp plan and put the money in it for this year? You
The
said,
verbal estimates, nothing in writing. Again, Clarion had proposed 2.5 years ago, $170,000.
let's just say it's 200, PJ, then,
Probably would be a budget supplement, because it would probably go over depending.
However, if you're going to put 60,000 in, and you've got 20,000 in there,
44
I
and
mean-
change, right.
right, does that
so,
make sense?
so we would this year, no, wait.
The 160.
We'd have 40,000 here and 60,000 in 2017, so you're, I mean,
104-ish.
it could change how your budget is, but
But I'm just asking, this year, if we
Yeah.
put the money in there and you guys wanted to do or we wanted to do the comp plan this year,
I think we should start it.
leave the 20,000 in there for reserves basically on the comp plan and then do the,
And
how much?
I mean,
then
I
do
think we need to look at it, no matter what. We need to know what the costs are and what they will do.
So maybe you can bring that back to us,
Yeah.
PJ, what that would be for the comp plan plus anything that you needed in your budget besides that.
If the commission,
And while you're at it, go down the basement and get out the money-making machine.
Yeah, I know.
I know, but we should put it in there and just for consideration, people keep talking about it. And if we decide we're just gonna wait, that's fine too.
Yeah,
So if the-
that's right.
if the commission's okay with it, I'll put out official requests to different companies and get proposals and
How
report
how long does
back.
it take to do one?
A comp plan? Clarion said they could do it in 8 months. That was the last time I spoke with them.
If we put some money in in 2017,
could do it.
take most of that year to do it.
Be about right.
And it also depends on when they can start also, because we wouldn't be the only thing they'd be working on.
But if we told them this year that we wanted it in 2017, it might make a difference.
Sure, they could put us on their schedule.
All right.
So we have until September to finalize the budget, and if what I'm hearing is something you want to do, why don't we make a motion?
Well, I think we would have to wait till we actually have an official.
But to direct him,
Okay.
have a motion to direct the department to bring forward.
We haven't made any direction that way yet, have we?
No, but we're in hearings. We're not enough. Am I wrong? Can we make?
No.
Need clear direction or a consensus. If
Yeah.
you wanted to say, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree, we can do that. But the official vote will have to happen during a commission meeting.
True, but to direct them to bring it so that,
We just need a
They
general
have a
consensus, a
foundation.
clear
Yeah.
direction.
I think they got that.
so we'll do it this way, by consensus. Do you wish to have this carried forward?
Looked at, yeah. See what the totals are.
Yes.
Anyone object?
I object.
We have consensus.
Thank you, PJ.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. There's one more budget.
Yep.
Coming up.
Is that our budget day?
Is our budget day? Or what?
We done?
Yeah.
Weird.
Tomorrow is the grueling
Oh,
one.
we gotta talk to people. Brittany now?
Good morning. The water protection budget, there's not much change from last year. The most significant changes, there are some changes in the miscellaneous fees and underneath postage, and most of that is due to the fact that every other year we have an installer training that they actually reimburse us. It's self-funded, but we do put that in the budget, so those are the biggest changes in this budget. The only other change under salaries and overtime is the insurance increase.
So what are you are you asking for any money?
No, the budget is similar to 2016 with the exception of removing those costs associated with the installer training.
Actually, you went down a little bit, huh?
Yes, 3750.
Good job, Brittany.
Any other comments on this one? If not, we have one more.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Interested in one more?
Spring Creek.
Oh.
That's what we have.
Yes.
The Spring Creek budget, that one is pass-through, so that's 100% reimbursable. The difference is that we were approved for this amount, so we budgeted 135 for 2016, so it's 90 for the remainder of the cost.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions about this one? If not, we're done.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.